Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar session on community solar resources for multifamily affordable housing providers developed by the Multifamily Affordable Housing Collaborative under the National Community Solar Partnership. Next slide. I know we have limited time, so I'm going to move us quickly through our introduction slides. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. This session is being recorded. Questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. Please type your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat box. Closed captioning is available by clicking the Show Captions button to view. And we invite you all to introduce yourselves in the chat. Please type your name and affiliation. And for technical assistance during the webinar, chat with Derek Barleski with NREL. Our agenda for this webinar: we'll first provide an overview of the National Community Solar Partnership, jump to presentations by NREL, Urban Ingenuity, Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future on the resources. Then we'll move to Q&A with presenters and wrap up and adjourn. Before we jump into this webinar, we want to set some context on the National Community Solar Partnership and its strategies. Next slide. The National Community Solar Partnership is one program run by the Solar Energy Technologies Office. Last fall, after an extended period of stakeholder engagement and some market modeling done by NREL, the DOE set a new target for community solar that will serve as our North Star. By 2025, the DOE has set a target that community solar capacity increase to 20 gigawatts in order to power the equivalent of 5 million households to save a cumulative of $1 billion on energy costs. And our pathway to success is how we're going to get there: providing technical expertise and capacity building through our collaboratives, for example, working with states through our current states collaborative and other mechanisms, increasing access to capital through our Credit Ready initiative, increasing customer engagement, and hearts and minds, addressing community solar messaging and to help standardize the meaningful benefits, which are greater household savings, increase to low and moderate household access, increased resiliency and grid benefits, community ownership and equitable workforce development provided by community solar. Thank you. Next slide. The National Community Solar Partnership currently has over 1,000 partners from over 700 organizations across 50 states. And the National Community Solar Partnerships tracks market trends in community solar via Sharing the Sun, an annual report published by NREL. Partners can collaborate via our online community platform Mobilize through meetings and webinars, and partners have access to direct technical assistance from DOE national labs and third-party subject matter experts. If you're not currently a member, we welcome you to register and join at the website on the bottom of the slide. Next slide. Please note technical assistance is offered to partners on demand via a rolling application process at no cost, and we welcome partners to apply. Thank you. Next slide. Now I'd like to pivot to the theme of this webinar and provide some background on our Multifamily Affordable Housing Collaborative. The collaborative was convened in 2020 and active engagement concluded in the spring of 2022. We had 13 members across the US with portfolios from 5 buildings to more than 300. Participants received technical assistance support to reach their goals from DOE, NREL, Urban Ingenuity, and Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future. More information on the collaborative and the resources can be found on its webpage, and the address is at the bottom of the slide, which we welcome you all to view post this webinar. Here's the list of our Multifamily Affordable Housing Collaborative members, and I'd like to thank all the members for participating in the collaborative and their contribution to the development of these resources. The resources we'll review today are Community Solar Project Models, Multifamily Affordable Portfolio Screening Package, and a Modeling Tools Spreadsheet and User Guide, an overview of the HUD Utility Allowance, and Resident Engagement Tip Sheet. Next slide. And now I'd like to pass it to Jeff Cook from NREL, who will outline the Community Solar Project Model.
Thanks so much, Shani, and happy to be here. We have a bunch of speakers today, and I'm going to talk about this section, and then we'll move to the next. and I'm looking forward to it. So one of the key things we did within the Multifamily Affordable Housing Collaborative was to look at particular community solar project models that could be deployed in this particular segment. And so what is the affordable housing sector? What does it look like? So there's two general types. There's the unsubsidized, naturally occurring affordable housing. What we mean by that is it already exists and it's affordable in the market based on market rates. And then there's publicly supported multifamily housing, meaning that housing is subsidized in some way to allow for low-income individuals to be able to secure housing without having to compete with other more affluent people as you would otherwise have to do in the naturally occurring segment. And so there's a variety of different public housing or publicly subsidized support mechanisms, that we flag on the right there. And we'll talk about some of those or the characteristics of those in the context of this conversation. We also know that community solar could help support those that live in multifamily housing. And we also know in general that there's over 5,000 megawatts of community solar across 2,000 projects, of which a small percentage, 200, do serve low-income customers. And that's estimated at 26,000 LMI households. And so there's significant opportunity in this space to expand, as we know, community solar and also expand low-income people's ability to benefit from community solar, given especially that a lot of low-income households live in multifamily buildings. There's a lot of potential on those buildings, so you could do on-site shared community solar, or you can do off-site and still support these folks living in multifamily housing. In particular, we also know that there's over 10,000 megawatts of technical potential on public housing alone. That's one subset of the publicly subsidized housing that exists in the market today. And so today we are going to talk about some different models that could be used to support multifamily low-income households participation in community solar. So we can move to the next slide. So in general, there are some key barriers. As I mentioned, there's a great opportunity for deploying community solar on multifamily housing, but there are barriers for getting it onto those buildings and then also having low-income people that live in the buildings benefit from the generation on the roof or adjacent to the building or otherwise off-site. So first and foremost, there are financing challenges associated with deploying solar projects. And there are some opportunities for being able to maximize existing financing opportunities for multifamily buildings, particularly those that are managed by nonprofits or managed by entities that are getting subsidies from the federal government or otherwise. And we'll talk about some of those in the context of this conversation. Even so, there's a split incentives problem. So you can have a master metered building where where there's one meter for the entire building and utility costs are divided between households based on size of unit or some other mechanism. Then there's individually metered, where each individual unit is connected to the grid, and thereby we know the exact consumption from that particular unit. Depending on which of those exist can influence whether or not you can deploy solar, and also whether or not you're going to get the benefits to the low-income resident that lives within the unit, depending on whether it's master or individually metered. Assuming it is individually metered, it's possible you could get a direct benefit from the community solar bill savings, but it's not always true. And that's because it depends upon, especially if you're in a publicly subsidized building, how utility allowance structures are determined, because those that live in public housing are not to spend more than 30% of their income on rent or utilities combined, but they can spend up to 30%, and that can influence if your utility bill goes down, your rent may go up. Even if you can navigate those challenges, there's significant capacity challenges with multifamily affordable housing providers to actually deploy these solar projects, even if they had the interest in doing so. So we can move to the next slide. We understand that there are these barriers, but we also know that there's been a lot of community solar activity, a lot of interest, and pathways forward that can navigate the challenges just articulated. So we're going to walk through these four particular examples as you see them here, starting with those that are most easy for the for the multifamily affordable housing provider to participate in, solar hosting utility partnerships being two of those, and then those that become more where the multifamily affordable housing provider becomes more involved in the operation or implementation of the project. And so for each of these, we'll talk about them in turn. So let's go to the next slide. Solar hosting is fundamentally where you lease your rooftop space as a multifamily affordable housing provider, and then ultimately you get a lease payment, and you can use that lease payment to support your operation and maintenance costs or otherwise provide indirect benefits to your residents. And so that's the structure here. A lot of you are probably familiar with it, especially if you're in the affordable housing provider space. It minimizes some of the challenges with deploying a solar project because you more or less outsource that to the third party and you're just managing a lease, and a lot of providers already manage leases for rooftop space, so they're familiar with that construct. It can also address those financing challenges as mentioned, and then lease payments primarily are used to offset operating expenses. So the consideration here is you're not really providing a direct benefit to low-income customers necessarily or residents necessarily in this particular model. And of course, you still need to consider other roof-related operation and maintenance activities associated with your roof when you now have solar on it as well. So it can add complexity there. But in general, a lot of folks are familiar with this. It's a relatively easy model, but it doesn't provide a lot of generation of revenue that can be supported to LMI households. So we can go to the next slide. A utility partnership is fundamentally where community solar is developed and maintained, operated, or otherwise contracted with the utility. And then all that's happening here is a multifamily affordable housing provider or residents within those buildings can support or be subscribers to the community solar project itself. And so there are a couple of issues with this particular model or some considerations. So at first, capacity is easier because you don't have to manage it's the utility managing the development and construction and operation of the project. But there can be a subscription management issue or partnership between the two entities. Certainly also the utility can provide those direct bill credits where that's possible, or provide it to a master meter building and have the opportunity for indirect bill savings, indirect benefits delivered to the homeowner. Indirect benefits being something like free Wi-Fi, a better building, improvements, or additional social services, et cetera, that could be deployed. And then of course, there is a subscription management problem, and it's easier to maintain these in the future because if someone leaves the household and another low-income group household comes in, then ultimately if you keep the subscription with the housing unit, you can reduce some of your subscription management costs related to that. So in general, that's a utility partnership, and we know a lot of multifamily affordable housing providers do participate in this structure. So we can move to the next model. In this particular model, it's related to new construction and rehabilitation. So you saw before, there's a particularly good financing opportunity to incorporate solar when you're already planning to do a deep rehab. So basically you're tearing down the building and redoing it, or you're newly constructing an entirely new building. There are opportunities to use LIHTC incentives here to also help reduce the overall cost of the entire construction. And you can also incorporate solar into that broad development process. Of course, considerations here is there's less capacity needed because you already have to do contracting to do this work. And so your team will already have to do it, and solar can be baked into your overall process. It can also then open up those opportunities with different financing models to do this. The problem, of course, is you have a lot of buildings that aren't coming up for rehabilitation, and certainly you have a lot of existing housing stock out there that you're not looking to build more. So this opportunity is specific to this area, but certainly there's a lot of buildings coming to their end of their useful life for which they could be rehabilitated or new construction could be possible. Here again, you can find ways to do either direct or indirect bill savings depending upon the utility allowance structure. So if you are Section 8 housing or you're working with the LIHTC program, then you are most likely able to provide direct bill savings. But of course, you'd have to investigate that on a building by building basis to ensure that that is true. But fundamentally, a decent opportunity when you have units in your portfolio that qualify in this area. And now we can move to the fourth one. The fourth one is the most significant and most intensive for the multifamily affordable housing provider. And the typical example here is the Denver Housing Authority, of course, a part of the Multifamily Affordable Housing Collaborative that did this particular model. Of course, some of the others referenced today were also done by some of the other members of the collaborative. So certainly there are lessons learned from all those entities we could think with anyone interested in any of the particular model. But here, back to this particular one, is where the multifamily affordable housing provider self-built the offsite community solar project. And then they partnered with a variety of not just their own residents within their own buildings, but also other affordable housing providers and the utility to offtake the power such that they could maximize bill savings opportunities to all of the residents that are benefiting from the community solar project. Again, this one is off-site, meaning it's far away from the location, but of course, you could also consider doing community solar on rooftops and having the same kind of effect here. This doesn't need to be particularly off-site. There are challenges, of course. This is the most intensive, right? A lot of capacity needed. You need a lot of expertise in energy procurement, energy to project management, operation and maintenance, potentially, unless you outsource those aspects. So definitely a lot of capacity needs, but it shows that some have done it. In addition, there are financing partnerships available to support community solar projects by the housing provider doing it. You remove some of the middlemen of developers, and the hope is you can maximize more bill savings. And then, of course, you still have a split incentive utility allowance challenge here. And in this particular case, I've referenced a DHA. They did both direct or indirect benefits depending on the construct of the building. So certainly if you're doing a community solar project, you don't have to only provide one type of bill savings or a benefit to low-income residents. Rather, you can, of course, mix and match for those that subscribe. And so again, we can move to the next slide. Those are 4 models. I went through it relatively quickly today so that you could get a sense of them all. Like I said, we're happy to answer any questions about them or put anyone in touch with the folks that have been involved in them. And so from here, I'm happy to move us to the next slide. And then Robin will be discussing the portfolio screening package. Take it away, Robin.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jeff. Really exciting to hear about the work you've been doing about various community solar project models for multifamily affordable housing. I'm happy to present on this next set of resources that NREL has developed. It's a portfolio screening package for those multifamily affordable housing providers who are considering developing community solar on their properties. So as compared to the project models Jeff described. So again, my name is Robin Burton. I'm a research analyst with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I'm leading NREL's participation in the NCSP and have been happy to support DOE in the implementation of the Multifamily Affordable Housing Collaborative. So as part of the collaborative, let's stay back on that previous slide if we could. As part of the collaborative, NREL partnered with Urban Ingenuity to provide technical assistance to a couple of the members of the collaborative who were interested in looking across their portfolio of properties to understand how to prioritize which properties to get started with or to work on next as far as community solar deployment went. So this suite of resources that NREL produced for this package include a fact sheet and case study about the portfolio screening approach, a portfolio screening workbook that lays out a process for evaluating policies at the state level as they pertain to development of community solar for MFAH, and a presentation that goes through step-by-step how to use NREL's REOPT model to conduct techno-economic analysis of just a few high priority sites within a portfolio to develop a cost-optimal project model. So I'm going to talk more about those resources in these next few slides. So for the portfolio screening approach, the purpose was to enable multifamily affordable housing providers to take a data-informed approach to identifying and prioritizing buildings in their portfolios that are most amenable to community solar development. Based on our work with 2 members of the collaborative, we identified 2 primary use cases for this approach. One was to look across the whole portfolio of MFAH properties to determine the maximum number of community solar candidate sites within that portfolio, and to consider taking advantage of economies of scale and developing perhaps multiple projects concurrently. The overarching questions in this use case are, what is the total community solar opportunity across my portfolio? And for which properties is community solar development economically viable within my portfolio? Another use case for this approach is to identify a few highest priority sites within an MFH portfolio where it makes the most sense to get started or continue with community solar development. So the guiding question here is, which are the priority properties for community solar development within my portfolio and where are they located? So that first use case is really casting a wide net to say, what are the maximum number of properties where I really want to think about solar? And the second one is really identifying those highest priority cases, and it can be used for both purposes. The portfolio screening approach is organized into 6 steps, which I'm going to go through in more detail in the next slides. The first step is to gather data and generate a site list of properties across the portfolio. The next 3 steps can be conducted in parallel, and they include using the policy screening workbook to evaluate the policy landscape in states where you have properties, to conduct solar technical potential to understand the rooftop potential or the solar potential at your properties, and then to conduct financial analysis, which you'll learn more about in the next presentation by Urban Ingenuity. The next step would be to conduct techno-economic analysis of a few high priority sites. And then the final step is implementation of the plan. So let's talk about these steps in more detail. Within the fact sheet and case study, you'll find this appendix, which is a table of the steps, the guiding questions answered by each step, some details related to those steps, the results from the step, and tools that can support that step in the process. So again, we went through this process with MFAH collaborative members, and then we developed this kind of do-it-yourself approach to going through this process and laying it out. So in the data gathering step, you're answering the question, what does my portfolio of MFAH buildings look like? So here you may use Energy Star Portfolio Manager or another tool to create a list of all buildings in the portfolio, and again, pulling data from Portfolio Manager if appropriate. And the results are to identify the total number and geographic distribution of sites in the portfolio. The next step, and again, these next 3 steps can be conducted concurrently, is to answer the question, what does the policy environment look like in the states or cities where I have properties? And so this is where the policy screening workbook that we've developed comes into play. The policy screening workbook assigns values to states regarding their policy landscape and categorizes them into positive, neutral limited, or limited based on the mix of policies available in that state and the extent to which they may enable community solar. So by applying this screen, you can come up with a priority site list narrowed by the policy environment. I do want to emphasize here that just because a state may be identified as limited in the process, by no means you couldn't do community solar there. It's just to kind of take a high level view at what the policy landscape looks like and get a sense of how enabling it may be. The next step is solar technical potential. If you'll go back to the previous slide. The third step is to evaluate whether there's good rooftop solar potential where the properties exist. So the recommended tool here is NREL's PV Watts tool to calculate the maximum PV system size and annual generation for each site selected. And this further narrows the list, if that's your aim, by then also identifying properties with good solar potential. Next slide. I'll just quickly mention that, again, this other concurrent step is to conduct financial analysis, to answer questions, what business models are available for one site, or how can we finance building solar on multiple sites within our portfolio? Again, you're going to hear about that next from Urban Ingenuity. The 5th step in the process, again, is to conduct techno-economic analysis of just the few highest priority sites within your property, within your portfolio, as you're really thinking about getting started. So does it make simple economic sense to build a solar system, possibly paired with storage, at one of these locations? And how could a solar PV system increase resilience at these sites? The results from conducting this analysis are detailed results for each prioritized site, for where solar, possibly paired with battery storage, can provide cost savings, resilience benefits, and emissions reductions. The tool to use for this step is NREL's REOPT web tool. And again, the third resource within this package is a slide deck that goes through step-by-step how to use REOPT for MFAH providers to conduct this process. The final step in the portfolio screening approach is implementation. And this is a pretty broad one. How do we get to construction? So the step is identifying the key next steps, pitching to third-party investors as appropriate, and addressing any outstanding needs to get from this evaluation phase to construction. And I would flag here that a tool available from the National Community Solar Partnership is our technical assistance program. So NCSP offers free on-demand technical assistance for entities pursuing community solar, and we are available to provide support at any step along the way. Next slide. So going a little bit deeper on the portfolio screening workbook itself, this slide outlines the 7 tabs that exist within that workbook. So the first tab is an intro and methodology to the workbook itself, including an explanation of how the workbook ranks states based on their solar policy landscape. I'm going to jump down to item number 3 here, the policies. I want to emphasize that this workbook has a tab that includes a long list of all available policies across states. And this really is a snapshot in time. So we most recently updated this table in May of this year for all current and active policies that impact MFAH community solar development at the state level. So it must be updated as policies change. Taking a step up, then there's a matrix within this workbook at item number 2 that lists the states and then identifies which policies are available within that state to support MFAH community solar development. And then just taking that next step up, back up to number 1 is a state ranking that synthesizes the scoring values by state. And then further down through the workbook are more details on electricity rates, the scoring process, and some advanced user instructions for how to use this workbook in a DIY way to evaluate your property list. Next slide. Here's just a snapshot of that policy summary matrix. So you can see that states are listed there along the left, and then the policies that are included within this workbook are across the top. So net billing, 3 different flavors of net metering, performance-based incentives, and so forth. So, you know, again, I encourage you to download this resource, get to know it, and see if it may be useful for your circumstances. Next slide. Here's a snapshot of the scoring process itself. So again, we took a weighted approach to scoring. So the total maximum score for any given state is 100. And then there are different weights on the policies based on the importance of an understanding of the state policy landscape for that state. So within this model, we've identified states with a score between 70 and 100 as positive or particularly enabling of community solar development for MFAH, and then moving down the line to neutral positive, neutral limited, or limited. Again, emphasizing that these rankings don't necessarily have a bearing on whether or not you can do community solar in these states. They're just kind of doing some ranking about where the most enabling policy landscapes may exist. Next slide. And then again, there's a tab that provides advanced user instructions on how to use this workbook to evaluate your own portfolio. So there's a tab where you can actually enter in your own property list and then apply the state rankings to come up with a list of which properties may be in states with the most enabling policies. So in this example portfolio in the table at the top, you can see that for this portfolio, there were 5 properties that fell in states with positive landscapes, and then moving down the line. So the table at the bottom shows the 6 states within this portfolio in policy in states with the most enabling landscapes. Next slide. So just a quick overview of what's presented in the slide deck about using REOPT for techno-economic analysis for a few key properties. The purpose of the step is to conduct more detailed analyses for a select number of sites to assess how distributed energy resources such as solar plus storage can help meet your goals. Again, REOPT is a free, publicly available techno-economic optimization model to determine DER sizes and dispatch strategies to minimize the life cycle cost of energy at a site. Answering a number of questions. In the interest of time, let's move on to the next slide. And then just a snapshot of the React Web tool itself. Again, there's a financial mode where you optimize DERs and dispatch strategy to minimize the lifecycle cost of energy. There's also a resilience mode that optimizes to sustain critical load during grid outages. Again, here are links to the tool and the user manual, and the resource we've developed here is to take you through step-by-step how to use this model to look at a few of your high priority MFAH properties. Again, here's the summary of the 3 resources available. The links are in the chat. And with that, I'm happy to pass the mic over to Ian Fisher with Urban Ingenuity to talk more about the financial model.
Thank you, Robin. All right. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes,
Yes, you're
Urban
coming
Ingenuity.
through.
Okay, good. Sorry, I'm in a low connectivity place for the Urban Ingenuity, we are a solar developer and investor. We also do a bunch of work in microgrid development and PACE financing. We were actually incubated out of an affordable housing developer, so we spend a lot of time thinking about solar and our projects sort of in conjunction with affordable housing. You can slide forward one, please. There we go. And a lot of our early work it was done with the national, actually a lot of our work continues to be done with the National Housing Trust. I think I saw Ryan online, working to develop solar projects for the benefit of affordable housing and the residents in particular. And I think there were a few sort of key things to how we think about solar. You know, in many ways, it's an extension of the real estate practice, and you know, roofs are just another asset that part of the facility that can be monetized. You know, people have been putting cell towers up there for a long time. Solar is just another way to do that, and community solar is actually a fantastic way to help deal with some of those split incentive issues that were raised earlier, right? You know, if you can't use it on site, you can still get benefit by using it off site. And we've done some really interesting things where with community benefits agreements, so that, you know, even though the tenants aren't paying the bills, we're basically providing the savings back to the residents through community benefits agreements, rather than the savings to, you know, a HUD-backed PPA payment. You guys, the affordable housers, you're used to the complexity of the financial structures from affordable housing. You know, LIHTC deals are not unlike solar tax equity deals, so that's just sort of another benefit of how I think this market is really, you know, a great match for solar development. And again, I think wrapping in solar with your overall development thinking actually is a really good way, and across your portfolios is a really good way to benefit and get economies of scale on projects that otherwise might be small, which is why oftentimes groups outsource it to someone who's doing just a lot of solar. You can move forward, please, on the thing. Great. So the financial modeling tool really is a complement to the screening tool that Robin was describing. It works well to help you evaluate, you know, multiple projects across your portfolio, even in multiple states, and sort of get a sense of the overall economics of it, and like make the argument to decision makers, hey, we've got, you know, 100 properties, 50 properties, 10 properties, and if we ran them through, you know, the pro forma and we developed it, you know, what do the returns look like? Does this make sense for our business model to incorporate within our practice? It also can work quite well, and we do this all the time, for individual projects or small projects that we're actually developing. You know, once you go beyond the screening phase, we continue to refine our tool as we go through the development, just to keep track of sort of how we're doing, making sure that the economics hold up over time, keep decision makers up to date, and you know, manage it through development. In addition to so there's an Excel-based tool that's available. And then in addition to that, we have a user guide that has step-by-step instructions. Also it comes preloaded with an example portfolio that you can play with. As has been noted earlier, states vary by their regulations and what you can't do and what you can do and what the incentives are and what the cost of energy is. So there's a lot of variability. But it is again a real estate type pro forma model with sources and uses and project scope and returns that should be at least familiar to many of you. Move forward. The tool also includes I'm going to just run through some of the tabs. I didn't want to go through a full live fire model because that can take some time, but just point to some elements in the tool that you can look at. And of course, through NCSP, we and others can be helpful in answering questions if they come up as you're using the tool. But we do have a pretty detailed instructions tab that goes into quite a bit of detail about each of the tabs in the slide. And there are some, there are a lot of options within that, but we preload it so you can get a view of it going forward. Preload a project so you have one to work from. Can you move forward? The next slide is the base is the project scope tab, and again here you can sort of see that there are multiple sample projects with different states, and in here you enter all the sort of basic information about your project: system size, your utility spend, or what you think you're going to be able to charge for the electricity on that system, estimated production, incentives for the project, cost for that installation of that particular project. A lot of these things, as you get into doing development, you'll get a good feel for sort of rules of thumb, and like, oh yeah, for this type of building type in this location, it costs us $250 per watt to install. And you can do quite a bit with the sort of rules of thumb, and then as I said, you can get it more and more refined as you actually have a real project to work with. Next slide, please. Sources and uses, again, are just sort of should be familiar if you've done real estate portfolios, but sort of can break it down several of the categories that we typically see. You can actually expand on these as you want to get into more detail, depending on sort of your needs, but sort of we lump them into some categories that are manageable to start with, have some rules of thumb in there, but again, those are sort of flexible and fungible. The sources, we typically finance with a combination of market rate debt, tax equity, incentives, and sponsor equity. And I guess one thing to note, and I should have mentioned this, the new legislation, the new IRA legislation, is going to change the face of tax equity for the better. And that could have a ton of positive implications, both from expanding the 30% ITC to adding LMI adders to take the tax credit to 40%, to a number of provisions that allow nonprofits and others to more effectively and efficiently monetize the tax credits. So we're really excited. Again, this model, you can adjust it to deal with those larger numbers, but it's something to be aware of, that the policy landscape is changing to our benefit. Next slide. The pro forma tab, again, will look like a real estate pro forma. It's got your income, you can your expenses. You can build in a vacancy rate if you want to assume that some of your electricity is not getting sold. We typically try to find structures where all of our electricity is going to be used and that you can flex it between different customers, but all of that's in there. All the sorts of things you need to think about when you're building. It's not just build a thing. You've got to also factor in insurance, operation and maintenance, asset management. If you are selling electricity and you need to actually bill subscribers, that can be a painful process, and so it's just something to be very mindful of as you think about doing projects. And then you can build in community benefits and other sorts of things. But again, hopefully it looks sort of very familiar to the real estate model. Next slide. So the returns tab is one that we think is really important as you're making the case to, just for your own decision making, but also as you're working with decision makers in your organization. And we have the ability, we've set it up so that you can look at benefits to a number of different types of partners. So certainly sponsor equity, your time needs to be valued, but you may also want to codify how much community benefit, in terms of job trainings or energy savings or savings to LMI residents that you want to show. So the tool has a lot of stuff, and happy to follow up with others, but I'm going to pass it on at this point. So thank you. And Lauren, you are up.
Thanks, Ian. And thank you to the Department of Energy's National and Community Solar Partnership for, oh, sorry, if you can just go back to the first slide, for both hosting this webinar and hosting a multifamily affordable housing collaborative. As there are a lot of things that go into both selecting a site and then financing it, there are also things that need to be identified around the affordable housing sector and policies and programs associated with it. I'm Lauren Westmoreland. I'm with Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future, also known as SAFE. And we are a nonprofit collaborative that has 12 of the nation's largest affordable housing nonprofit developers and owners, representing about 150,000 units nationwide. And I lead our energy and sustainability team, focusing on ways that we can ensure that the affordable housing sector can access energy, sustainability, and in this case, community solar. So I'm excited to talk with you a little bit further about the research that we've done around how community solar and HUD subsidized housing intersects, and ensuring that we can make sure that tenants and residents can receive the benefits of community solar. And then we'll also be talking a little bit about the resident engagement tip sheet that we developed based on feedback and case studies and best practices that were identified through the Multifamily Affordable Housing Collaborative. If we can move to the next slide. So why community solar when it comes to affordable housing? As we all know, traditional solar installations are difficult for renters, especially low-income households, to access. And through that, they just historically haven't had much access to this market. You can see here on this slide that overall traditional solar, like residential, commercial, and utility solar, is a large share of the market. However, community solar is a growing portion of the industry, and we're excited about how this is taking off. And it's a way for renters to access clean energy without having to install panels on their own home or the place that they're renting. And what this really means as far as economic benefit goes is that in looking at, as an example, in Massachusetts, a community solar subscription could lower residents' electricity costs by 35%. And those dollars can be used to supplement different things like medications, higher quality food, paying for their educational opportunities. It's money back in low-income residents' pockets that is very valuable. With that said, there's some barriers. So if we can move to the next slide. So we decided to look at, well, first of all, are community solar programs interested in serving both the low-income communities and affordable housing? So we first started with looking to see what is going on. We did not do an exhaustive research, but we looked at 11 community solar programs around the country to see how they are setting up their programs, if they're having any set-asides for low income, if they're putting anything in place to allow for affordable housing owners and their residents to participate. And what we found is that through this non-exhaustive search that we did back in December of 2021, that every program has identified serving low-income households as a priority. There's either a set-aside, the program is only for low-income, or somewhere in between. And so that's fantastic. We can see that there is interest across the board in making sure that this is accessible. In addition, most programs are requiring that when low-income households participate, that they are receiving the economic benefits from from program participation. And that means language specifically around you can't see rent go up just because they're participating in this program. You can't see their utility allowances change, and other sorts of ways that they're defining that there needs to be true economic benefit back to those low income household participants. In addition, several programs are also identifying that they want multifamily housing providers to participate, whether it's through allowing them through subscriptions for their common space energy usage, or if it's specifically looking to partner with multi-family housing providers. There are different ways that it's showing up that community solar programs are really interested in working with this sector. Next slide, please. So once we saw that, we recognized that there's an opportunity to ensure that when those economic benefits go to residents, that they can remain with residents. And also that community solar programs were looking for guidance to make sure that, and affordable housers really were looking to make sure there was guidance to ensure that that actually could take place, especially for HUD assisted housing, where there is the intersection of all of the regulations associated with HUD. Luckily, there was one essentially case study out there of where HUD had provided guidance to a community solar program where we could take a look at it and see if that did align with the rest of the community solar programs out there. In 2018, HUD had issued guidance for the California Solar on Multifamily Affordable Housing Program, also known as SOMA. This is one of the, this program has been around for a while, and it has a previous iteration of it. And what that program has said is essentially economic benefit has to go back to residents. We want you serving low-income communities. We want you serving affordable housers. HUD issued guidance to basically state that when these benefits are received, that they are an incidental benefit to the renter, meaning that this was not a planned benefit. This is not something that the resident was electing to participate in, but it's something that they are receiving. And the benefit is assigned to the unit, not the resident. So when the resident leaves, they may or may not be able to take that solar subscription with them. And then lastly, one important thing to note is that the benefit they received, the dollar amount that they received, the credit on their bill, it's not tied to energy consumption in any sort of way. It's based on other factors, perhaps the distribution of the amount of solar produced, or based on some other factors that either were decided by the program administrators, the developers, and or the affordable housers. And through that, then HUD essentially provided guidance that because all of these things are happening, because the residents don't necessarily have agency in making these choices, because it's not tied to their actual energy consumption, that it should not impact their utility allowances. And it also shouldn't be included in their income. And therefore, through providing that sort of guidance, residents are now able to access the full economic benefits without having to slide their rent up or slide their utility allowances down, or somehow impact anything around the economics of their situation. So this was great. However, it was only for California, and it was only for the SOMA program. So we decided to look and see, does this guidance seem like it could be applied across the rest of the programs that were CPOP up. So if you can move to the next slide. And just to note, for those who may not be as familiar with the way that rent and utility allowances are structured, as Jeff mentioned earlier in the presentation, for subsidized housing, tenants are supposed to only pay 30% of their income to their total housing costs. Anything above that, and you start to become rent burdened. And so through that, there is both the rent that they're going to pay, and then there's the utility allowances. And utility allowances are essentially estimates of how much a energy conservative household is going to use And they also assume that you have reasonable control over their utility usage. In the case of the production of solar and those benefits associated with solar, there's really not control on the tenant's front around how much solar is produced, if that solar remains online consistently, how much benefit they're going to see, and then therefore, any sort of impact around utility allowances doesn't make sense in that regard. Now, as more programs move further, and we know more about what's happening with that this may change, but at this point, especially since a lot of these solar programs are newer, we want to make sure that we're ensuring that we're not going over that 30%. So next slide. So we looked to see what was happening with these solar programs, and what we found is that most of them are relatively new, so there's not a lot of data out there, but they are typically aligning with SOMA guidance. And then through that, we think that, HUD's guidance to SOMA should be applicable. And if you look in the document that was shared in the links above, you can see a bigger picture of what's up here. But basically, it's a decision trees us to help sort of understand where are these programs falling, who's benefiting from it, who is making the decisions, and really who has agency around access to community solar. And in a lot of cases, we are seeing that they are really explicit in these programs that they may want to make sure that those benefits go back to the residents. There isn't any change in rent or utility allowance. Next slide. So excitingly, HUD took this research that we did, and they agreed that in certain cases this is absolutely true. So since we shared this information with them, in addition to California SOMA, they've also issued state level or jurisdiction level guidance for DC Solar for All, for Illinois Solar for All, and for the New York, the NYSERDA NY Sun program. In addition, they've also released national guidance that allows community solar programs that have not yet asked for determinations or state-specific guidance to look and compare their program to what HUD would say at this point, you sort of align with other guidance that has been issued. So they're giving a tool now that will allow for community solar programs to quickly understand if they're sort of falling in the bucket of making sure that residents can receive those full benefits. And we think that's really important, and we really appreciate HUD issuing this guidance, and we think that this is a good development. We're looking forward to seeing what happens as more and more residents, affordable housers, and others come online to make sure that this is working out the way that we intended, and that residents are receiving the economic benefit while also being able to participate in the clean energy transition. Next slide. In addition to doing that research, we also looked at what were some ways that once you have that guidance, once you've identified your site, once you've been able to finance it and then put the solar in, how do you make sure that you can get residents to subscribe or understand what a subscription is, and all of that? So what we did is when we had our multifamily affordable housing collaborative, we collected stories from them and interviewed them and put together essentially this tip sheet that will help you understand as you're perhaps launching a community solar program or when you're working with affordable housers, what may be some ways to ensure that efforts around subscribing residents will go smoothly and will be a positive process for everyone. So the first thing is to note around really assembling your team. For large affordable housing organizations, you might want to look and identify internally and empower those who could be potential champions. If you're a smaller organization or you feel like this is not in your wheelhouse, definitely look. There's lots of partners out there. As an example, in the DC Solar for All program, Groundswell is one of the partners that has been identified to help walk residents and others through the process. And in a lot of cases, there are those who have sort of been identified through the community solar as those who can provide that sort of external partnership. Ensure that you're building a resident-centered strategy. So your outreach plan should focus on key benefits to the residents. Everything from dollars back in their pockets to easy signups, all those types of things. And then, make sure you're using multiple channels of communication, whether it's, through resident services or other property management folks on site, flyers. If there's different sort of monthly communication exchanges, make sure you put this in through that. And then lastly, just making sure you're addressing barriers up front. You really want to make sure that that program qualification and verification is easy, and where you can use processes that residents have already gone through. If they've already gotten through a background check, or if you already have the residents' income information, let's make sure that we're not collecting it again. We can use that to just sort of qualify them. And then always making sure that you have key consumer protections, and that this isn't going to result of any sort of chance of residents having to come out of pocket, or anything around shutoffs, around utilities, or any of that type of stuff. So, and now I'll go ahead and stop there. And here's the links, and Nora has been kind enough to put them in the chat. And I think that moves us into Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Lauren. So I'm Nora Barger. I work with Ian at Urban Ingenuity. And we have just a few minutes for questions. We don't have any open questions in the Q&A, so please type those in if you have any. I do see there's one hand up from Hannah. Hannah, if you have a question, we can unmute you, and would love to hear what you have.
I'm so sorry. That was actually an accident. I didn't mean to raise my hand.
No worries.
So sorry. I was like, why is she calling my name? Hold on to me. Sorry.
You're like, I
Just
don't want to talk.
So sorry. Great job. Great information. I'll say that.
No problem. So anyone have any questions? You obviously can also raise your hand and we can call on you.
Okay. Hi, Nora, this is Shani. I saw a question that said, what was the optimum size portfolio to use for the portfolio screen? And I think this question goes to Robin.
Sure, thanks, Shani. Yeah, appreciate the question. Really that portfolio screening process can be used for any size portfolio. So whether you have 5 properties in your portfolio or 200, again, they're the two different approaches, either finding all of the properties within your portfolio where community solar really could be a good option, or really identifying the very top priorities. So any size portfolio, I think, can be a good candidate for using the process.
Thank you, Robin. And Ian, there was a question to you, just if you can expand upon just the benefits that you see with the IRA and with any of the new, tax benefits around equity.
Sure, and with the caveat that I have not digested it fully, and that there will need to be some regulatory process to, the agencies have to decide how they're going to carry out some of the laws. So I would say that caveat. So I think the first one is that the ITC is getting extended, or the 30% ITC is getting renewed. It was about to step down from 26% this year to 22%. And it's going back to the historical 30% as a baseline. Then there are various adders for low and moderate income and other jobs related things that can take you up to 40, 50. Some people have heard say you can get it up to 60% on the ITC, which seems really wild. So just the amount of tax credit that you'll monetize for the deal, will increase. Then there are provisions in there, and again, this is really where the accountants need to inform us all, but that will allow for a transfer of the tax credit a little bit more simply rather than what I've been led to understand is that means that you may not have to actually bring a tax equity investor into the tax equity flip structure. You may be able to just sort of assign and transfer that credit and get paid for it. And then there's also some provisions for nonprofits being able to get direct pay, where it would just be sort of like, you know, some of the credits that were happening during the COVID stimulus, you know, where you could get basically pay, you know, a refund of taxes you never paid. But again, I think a lot of the particulars of that are still getting sorted out. Our general view is, heck, even the 30% ITC is better. And then if we can do 40% for a low and moderate income, we're going to be able to do a lot more benefit.
And we do have a question. Can you do community solar project outside of your state? So imagine across state lines. So Robin, that maybe is a question for you.
Thanks, Nora. I was wondering the sort of fuller context around that question and whether they might actually been referring to financial implications. Ian, did you have a take on that question about whether you can do a project outside of your state? I can't hear your audio.
You're on
Ian.
mute.
To benefit electric users within your, like if you live in Maryland and you're building a project in Pennsylvania, I think I'm not aware of any states that will let you wheel electricity across a state line. That would seem hard. You can certainly, you could build a community solar project in the next state over, and then, you know, you'd have to own it. You'd probably own it under its own SPE. You could then take the proceeds from that and then reinvest it into, you know, through a community benefit contract back to your residents in your state. So you could do that, but I think it'd be hard to do a direct sale of electricity.
Yeah, and from what we really saw and like looking at the structure of community solar programs, they're looking to benefit residents and low-income communities within the utilities territory. So I would imagine that it may get a little messy, and at least from like the program selection standpoint, they probably be looking for developers in the state to be serving those in the state.
So I want to note that we're at time. There are a few more questions that we don't have time for, but we have recorded all these and we'll keep record of them and we'll follow up as needed after the webinar. So I'm going to throw it back to Shani to close us out.
Yeah, thanks, Nora. Just next slide. So I forgot to introduce myself just really quickly. I'm Shani Vines with the Department of Energy. I work for the Solar Energy Technologies Office, and under the National Community Solar Partnership, I lead the Credit Ready Initiative and led the Multifamily Affordable Housing Collaborative. So just really quick, I really want to thank Nora, Ian, Lauren, Robin, and Jeff for all their support in this effort. And I welcome you all to view these resources on our Multifamily Affordable Housing Collaborative webpage and try the do-it-yourself portfolio screen and financial model. The link is under the first bullet. And if you do need technical assistance, I welcome you, to apply for our no-cost on-demand support if needed. And if you're not a member, please register and join our National Community Solar Partnership. The link to join is at the bottom of the screen here. So thank you everybody for your time and allowing us to go a few minutes after the hour. We appreciate it and hope to see you all soon.